acknowledge a member of the HAO board, Vladimir Hippolyte, who will share a few words before I turn it over to the moderator. Vladimir.
Thank you, Charlotte. First, I want to say a big thank you on behalf of the HAU Board of Directors to all of you who took the time to actually come here on a long weekend. So please give yourselves a nice round of applause. Thanks again. On behalf of the Board of Haitian Americans United, again, want to welcome you and want to, I'm very excited about this excellent event, this panel discussions we're going to have with some of these great panelists. So please be prepared to ask questions, listen attentively, and please, and the most important thing I believe is always to try to engage with the panelists, ask questions, and hopefully you've taken some time to look at all this beautiful art this new art. I think you're among the first to actually see this since it's been renewed. Every few months we rotate the pictures, the art pieces, not pictures, excuse me, the art pieces, and so I'm glad that you're all able to see that. Please note that there is an auction, a silent auction, so feel free to tell your friends to go ahead and bid, and all the proceeds go to support the Haitian Arts Assembly, and Toussaint Louverture Cultural Center, a crowning achievement of HAU here. So again, on behalf of the HAU Board, thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir. Again, I want to continue making a point. After the panel, you should literally go to this table in the back, to this table on your side here, where you will see signs about the silent auction. You'll also see some items that are for sale. So you don't want to leave here without picking up something to take back home or to share with your friends. Now I'm going to turn to the panel, and that will be totally under the purview of our friend Professor Patrick Sylvain. Now he is the moderator, not just because he is known to be a professor who has been heavily involved into Haitian art and culture. His affiliations are with Simmons University, with Howard University, and with Brown University. But he's also attended as an earlier founding member of the Assembly back in 1995. So he's been part of most of our art exhibitions, and he's written also about some of the exhibitions by the Haitian Artists Assembly. So he is well qualified tonight to actually moderate this discussion, which will be in part panel and then Q&A with you. With that, I turn it over to Patrick Sylvain.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for being here. I'm not going to read the bios because of time. However, please pick up a bio so that you could see the full, not the full, but at least a partial in terms of what they've done. Yvelyn Joseph, Steve Desrosiers, and Joseph Chéry are three different artists, okay? One is a musician, but also an art critic. One is a visual artist, but also an art critic. One is also a visual artist, but also a visionary. Their work, to me, seeing their work, I said to Joseph, I am not going to tell Joseph what questions I'm going to ask. I am not going to tell them at all, because what speaks to me for an artist, whether it is the visual art, whether it is the auditory musical, whether it is the corporeal movements, whether it is the visual fluid through cinema, each is very different. And so I will start by asking particularly Joseph Chéry and Yvelyn Joseph. Notice that they're not related. Joseph is the last name, Joseph is the first name. Okay, well, let's get that out of the way. With Joseph Chéry, I've known your work for a while. There is something in which you do in your work there's a particular movement. It's a movement from and towards, it's a sweeping movement in all of your work. But you also have embedded in your work a series of symbols. Some of them are scratches. Some of them are barriers. All of your work are never intact. And some of them also are coded biologically speaking. Honeybees. Some of them are cosmic or at least biological signs, equations. Why do you embed your work with so many symbols? What exactly are you trying to do beside the surface work? There's the surface work, but if you don't pay close attention, there's something much more that you are doing with your works. I would like for you to speak about that. And the question for Evelyn Joseph, there's an intimacy in your work, and that intimacy between animals. Quite often when you see typical Haitian painting, there is this imagination of the Haiti that could have been. It's also a reminiscence in terms of Africa as well. We have no lions in Haiti, no giraffe, no zebra, but Haitians always painting them. However, with you, it becomes intimate, particularly if you all could turn and look at the first piece, right? It is an intimate piece with an animal that we do not have in Haiti, but it's also very Afrocentric. There's a lot of movement in your piece. So how do you conceptualize the notions of Afrocentricity? And in a sense, it's almost like this ecocentrism, right? With the intimacy of an animal. It's not a cat, it's not a dog, it's a zebra. So if you could, perhaps I'm going to fuse Joseph first, and then you finish Joseph.
So this is where age becomes age before beauty. Well, let me answer this. Start by answering this question by making a plug. We invite you to take some time before you to look, explore, and get to know the work that we have here exhibiting on the walls. We put them up specifically for this purpose, for you, for your pleasure. And who knows, maybe you will adopt one of them and make it part of your family. Now, to answer your question, I want to thank you for being such a deep observant, not just a viewer, but for taking time to enter into the work and engage into a conversation with the work. This is really why I do everything that you mentioned. It is because the work is not just an idea being presented. It is an invitation to a very specific action. Now, when I say specific, that action will depends on who is standing in front of the painting, because the painting itself is a story, and it's a story that is unfolding. And my job as the painter is to write the first chapter of the painting and leave the rest open, so that every single one of you gets the opportunity to write your own chapter. The interesting thing is that as you write these chapters, and I say chapters because every time you stand in front of a painting, even if it's the same painting, every time you go back to that painting, you write a different chapter. And that chapter is written through the prism of what you are experiencing at that moment. So the symbols that you see in there are, one, to keep us connected to not just ideas, but to everything around us that tends to percolate these ideas, that tends to feed these ideas. And also, all these symbols are who we are, because we are made of so many different particles, so many things.
So those dust particles that you have in so many of these paintings.
The dust particles are movements, as you pointed out. We are always in motion. We are always going somewhere. No idea is static. So any idea to be a real good idea, it has to serve us. And to serve us, it has to move us. And we have to be willing to do that movement. So whether it is moving from point A to point B is one thing, or moving from this idea to its actual personification.
Good. Let me get to Louis, and then I will come to you with Steve.
Thank you. I do have a lot to say about the particular piece that was pointed out, and I think you covered on some of the things that I think a lot of my work also expresses, and it has to be, I think it's an extension of myself, to be honest. I think I try to showcase my own identity as well as other people of the African diaspora in my pieces. So although, to answer your question, a lot of the animals I include in my work, they're not necessarily animals that are part of Haiti or in Haiti, but I do see a connection between humans, animals, and plants. So I use a lot of different animals to convey different themes and emotions that I'm also facing when I'm creating these pieces, and a lot of symbolism. I think a lot of my work has hidden symbolism in it. The colors I use, the texture, kind of your point in adding the movement to kind of invite the viewer into the painting. For me, it's the texture, in addition to the movement, that kind of invites viewers to the painting. I think it allows people to see different perspectives in that. For the piece in the back with the zebra, what inspired it was just my own experience as a woman, but mainly a Black woman. I want my pieces to show the intersectionality between like different people, but just in general of being the woman that I am and the identity that I live in. And I think a lot of times that gets misconstrued. So with the zebra, as you all know, it's a very beautiful animal, but also it's not an animal that can be domesticated. Similar to like a horse. They look very similar, but the zebra is a very tough animal. It will fight, it won't let itself be tamed like some domestic animals we know today. And that's really what inspired me, and their sense of community. They travel in groups, so they really represent some sort of duality, not only in the black and white stripes, but also the identity of that particular animal. So I really wanted to showcase that by putting that very strong, powerful, kind of aggressive animal next to a Black woman, because I think in society a lot of times they view us as one thing. Very like surface or very typical stereotypes, and I'd like to showcase that we are able to exist in both, in the duality of that I can be strong and powerful, but I can also be soft and delicate and beautiful. So a lot of my work kind of just plays along with those themes of showing different aspects of humanity, but also me as an artist, being a Haitian artist. My art, I'm aware that doesn't look like the traditional artwork. And in doing what I'm doing with my different pieces, I'm trying to show that there is other perspectives and showing similar themes to some of my other artists who are like my counterparts, who I also love their work, who I pull inspiration from their work, but in my own way and in developing my own style. So.
Good. Thank you. Okay, so now we're gonna move to Steve Desrosiers. As I mentioned, he's a musician, talented guitarist, but also a very good critic as well. So how, when you think about music, I think in terms of tones, waves, and movements as well, what is the relationship for you between music and the musicality, if we could call it that, of the pieces that allow you to enter not only as a musician, but also as a visual receptor of what those artists have created, and therefore the waves, right? The waves that they have. Because art is not static. The same way that music is not static. If art is static, I'm sorry, it's junk. I'm very,
It's very opinion.
I'm very critical in that sense, right? Because art to move you, right? And as Joseph said, it's different chapters. You must look at an art, different angles, you discover different things. The same way that you read a novel, you discover different things. The same way that you see a masterpiece of a movie, you see it twice, 3 times, 10 times, you still discover something else. What exactly when you are writing that moves you, that discovers you, and perhaps connects to your musician side?
Fantastic. Thank you for that fantastic question. It's very layered, so I'm going to take a layered approach to responding. By way of introduction, I'm before you today because I happen to have gone to Boston College, where I was a student alongside Bill Forey, who became the husband. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is it too low?
No, she's
Oh, you were okay. We were both students at Boston College, and he fell in love with Lina Dulcina Forey, of course, was Haitian, and I was a history major, rediscovering Haiti as I was in Boston College. Because one of the things that happens when you leave Haiti and you come to America, you're so fascinated by America that you almost forget anything Haitian, right? You become ashamed of things that are Haitian, especially some of the more difficult art pieces that are, right? So when I was graduating, Bill invited me on an adventure. And he said, I'd like you to start studying Haitian art, particularly not only Haitian art, but Haitian music. So I was already a musician, and so that launched me into criticism. And we did that work with the Boston Haitian Reporter for 12 years. Shallow and I were fellow writers in that effort. So before I talk about the movements, one of the things that I see as I take a look at all the paintings here, I'm driven to think about the history that's here before us. So the first movement that I see as a historian is the one that involves our country and its relationship to wealth and to the arts. Haiti was a very rich island at one point, and so the people who could afford great painting were rich people. And what they considered great painting was you painted powerful people. So let's say after the Revolution, after the French painters have left the island, that means you have your Marie Christophe, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and this is what's considered great painting. And of course, you're going to paint them and house those paintings in somebody's fancy house. So not everybody can see these paintings as we can see them today. When we move into the time of the American occupation, there's a new strand of artists who are going to come from the streets, and they are going to represent their experience of Haiti. So as I look at the woman here who happens to be going about her day in a very, regular way, her movements aren't anything extraordinary. She's not holding a gun, there's no cannon. But this is a legacy. Joseph is carrying the work and the spirit of the lower class Haitian artists, I think the middle class Haitian artists who said, you know what? The life of the regular person is important too. And we're gonna celebrate that. There was also people, we don't have a lot of representation here of the voodoo tradition, I don't think, but Hector Hippolyte was the first one to say, you know what, we're gonna democratize what we paint, and we're gonna move into the spirit realm. I'm gonna show you these spirits that I see, that I have contact with because I am a voodoo priest. And I don't have a pretty way to show you their faces, but I want you to know this is part of our existence, right, on this island. And so when you look at the way that the artists have chosen their colors, when you're looking at the subject matter, when you're looking at portraiture, you're looking at the different conversations that art has had with our people, our island, and our fortunes, right? So that is the first wave of movement for me, right? Where they fit into the history of this entire adventure in visuals, right? Portraiture, the regular person, the poor person, the voodoo practitioner, what they do in life, right? And then the next thing I think about is composition, where the aspect that you speak to, the motion, the fact that it's not static. And I'm thinking about artists like Wilson Lee Cole, because they also did the same thing. Here's what a piece of this person's day. Some of the symbols that characterize what they're about, and the secrets of their personalities, the secrets of their destinies. And as you look to this and you peel off the layers, one of the conversations that I know an artist is looking for you to think about is the person in your own family who was that person, right? I don't come from rich people in Haiti, so there were members of my family who were maids in houses in Haiti. So I come from the full spectrum of that experience. So when I look at these artists, it brings me back to my childhood memories of Haiti, and I can see them moving again. It brings me back to these early memories, and that's the value that I see when I think about motion, when I think about historicity, and a piece of what you're trying to capture with the non-static nature of life, and therefore the non-static nature of what has to be good painting.
Very good. So for those of you also who do not know, you mentioned Henri Christophe. Henri Christophe had the first school of painters in Haiti, right? And Henri Christophe, not only he had his personal painter, but his wife had a painter, his children, right? And unfortunately, because of issues of destructions, right? You don't like one particular government administration, you destroy whatever, they tend to have a lot of the paintings that were painted during Christophe's reign. Guess where they are? Yale University. Okay? Yale University. So we don't think about this tradition of painting that really started with King Henri Christophe, that wanted to document, that wanted to create schools, school of arts, very early on. So there was a long tradition way before the American occupation. Now, there are certain terms that I would like for all of us to have this common language. We talk about texture, we talk about tone, we talk about composition, we talk about framing and movement. What is texture? What is tone? What is color? What is composition? And what did it do for you as artists as you enter that blank canvas? White canvas is blank. How do you enter it in order to have composition, texture, tone, and movement?
If I were a writer like you, I would say that I start by having a conversation and developing a relationship with words. When I'm standing in front of a canvas, I usually approach it as if I were about to start a prayer. It is a very intimate conversation that represents the most vulnerable moment of my day. Because I have to really bare myself in order to allow this transformation that will be taking place to begin to speak to me and invite me into this process. So colors, texture, symbols, they are all elements, just like words and punctuations, that allow me to express whatever it is that is percolating in front of me. A lot of times, artists, and I in particular, would begin with an idea. I have this thing that is bugging me, and I need to scratch it. Now, and I say this thing bugging me because I create art, work, as a billboard. We call them conventionally paintings. I consider them to be my billboard, my community billboard, where I post invitations for conversations. So that thing that is scratching me is in itself a world that I need to bring about. And I need to use every element possible to make that happen. And I say I am at my most vulnerable moment because I need not get in the way of that process. Because the moment I begin to get in the way and start thinking that it has to be done or said this way, then it is no longer this world that I am bringing about. It is my world that I'm creating. And I do not try to create a world that is my world.
Wait a second. So that we have, I understand what you're saying, but I would like for you to have the same kind of understanding. Here you're talking, because us artists as a writer is the same thing, right? Allow the subconscious, that thing in the ether, to come to reality. And afterwards, the self, I go back to the page and I edit, right? So you do not want to edit as the process is unfolding.
Correct.
Right?
That's correct.
So in other words, the subconscious, wherever that's flowing, let it flow. Let it be. And then you can sculpt it. If you're a cook, you could add little spices because something is missing or whatever, but whatever that you are going to cook, put it in the pot, let it stew, and then you can, right? As a cook, right? Okay, good. All right, so now that we have the same kind of language, continue.
Well, let me illustrate what I'm talking about with a little anecdote. I have a painting that is 5 feet tall. Actually, I think it's 6 feet tall. 6 feet tall by 3.5 feet wide.
So I'm 5'11", so 6 feet would be.
Right.
Yes.
Actually, it's 6 by 4. Now, imagine it's a pretty large canvas. And we were preparing for a show at Logan Airport. So everybody who wanted to be in that show was really busy trying to create something. I had an idea. Actually, this is the painting I'm talking about. I had an idea, and that was the problem. I started with an idea. I was in Haiti, 2011, after the earthquake, and I saw these ladies in clusters sweeping streets. And it was not what I remembered. I know in the countryside, yes, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 o'clock in the evening, everybody's throwing water, spraying water on the ground so that they can sweep the streets and the yards. But in the inner cities, in Port-au-Prince, in Pétionville, for example, you do not see that. So I saw these ladies in clusters doing this, and I was told when I asked that it was the government's effort to, 1, create jobs, but 2, to also really give people a sense that something is happening and that, yes, we are cleaning the debris. So that image stayed with me, and I knew I had to do something with it. I had no idea. So here I am, preparing for the show, months ahead of time, and I start painting this very large canvas. And it's going on, and it's going on, and it's not going anywhere, and I'm getting frustrated. The day before I am to deliver the painting, I am standing in front of this canvas, totally frustrated, almost in tears, because I cannot get anywhere with this. 10 o'clock about, I got so frustrated, I threw it on the floor, I grabbed a bucket of paint, I threw it on it, and just wiped the whole thing out. And I said, that's it, I'm done. I'm not even gonna try anymore. It's painted white now, I'm done, and I walked away. And at that point, I decided I'm not participating in the show. So I go, I cool off. I watched TV. I have no idea what I watched. Actually, the TV watched me because I was still sitting there trying to find a way to get out of my way. And then, maybe a couple hours later, something happened. Something kind of dragged me back. Lucky for me, I was using acrylic, so the paint had dried by then. I put it out. Now, the interesting thing is I wanted to paint this lady sweeping. The idea didn't change, except that this time I walked to the canvas without the idea. The idea brought me to the canvas. I became the instrument of the idea, as opposed to using the idea to create something. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I was signing off this painting. It was done. Now you can pay me $1 million and call it over. You can't do it again.
This one, what I was doing. Let me get to Evelyn and I'm going to come back to you and see. So, texture, composition, tone, how do you enter that the canvas, that
I
blank?
feel like you said a lot. But I don't know if I can,
Forget about what you said.
I don't know if I can add anything to it, because I understand him as an artist.
Well, I would
His
like
feelings.
for us to understand you as an artist.
Yeah, so to add to what Joseph was saying about his art process, I think a lot of artists go through that point where you're trying to figure out what you want to create, and sometimes the timing is just not right. And I myself have experienced that with my own creations, especially because a lot of my work involves multiple different textures, the composition and everything. So in a way I have a rough idea of what I'm going to create, but I never quite know how it's going to end. And sometimes I won't get that answer right away. Luckily for you, you got it like within the time window that you needed it done by. But I've had pieces where it took me months to finish because I just was not sure where I wanted to go with it. And I like to say my art process in general, I always say it's a visual diary. So a lot of the pieces that I'm producing or creating is like a reflection of what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling, things I'm observing in society, and then kind of just trying to find my own way to speak to that so that other people might relate to those pieces. So in terms of determining what texture, the composition, all those things, I kind of start off with an idea. And just about anything can inspire me if I'm being honest. I'll go into the store if I see certain texture, like of clothes or fabrics or colors that remind me of home. If it reminds me of a person or something I've seen, then I kind of take it with me. I'll buy it, and I kind of hoard a bunch of things if I'm being honest, because a lot of different things speak to me in that sense. So I kind of always put things aside, and then one day it kind of just clicks, and it sounds kind of like it just kind of comes to you. Similar to what you were saying, it's just like you're not sure, but one day it kind of just comes to you. Especially, I would say for me, my example of that would probably be my painting on the end with the headscarf. That piece was particularly challenging for me to finish, not because the idea was necessarily complex, but just in the sense of what I wanted to convey, because I wanted to mix a bit of like my Caribbean Haitian identity, but also include a bit of like African identity in it, and also some symbolism. So like in doing that, I kind of just wanted something very striking, and in that I wanted to include different elements of life. So I knew I wanted to use a wooden canvas, because I was like, I want to have that exposed, I want it raw, similar to like people in their true self, their true sense. And even though I wasn't in Haiti for most of my life, I grew up in the United States. I think a lot of certain images I see, I like relate to it. Recently I went to Haiti in 2023, and it was just, it felt familiar, even though I don't necessarily remember things, but it's like I felt like at home. I like at peace, so a feeling of tranquility. So that kind of pushed me to kind of finish this painting, because I let it sit for about, I would say 3 or 4 months. It was just kind of sitting there. I did the sketch and I left it alone. I was just like, I'll come back to it. And then I kind of could not figure out what I wanted to do in that sense. And again, to your point that you had started with acrylic. I started with acrylic because I was like, at least if I change it, I can like kind of work through it and figure it out. And slowly I ended up using oil on top. And that's the thing with my particular style. I'll use oil, I'll use acrylic, I'll use fabric, I'll use pen, ink, whatever it is that's near me. If it's speaking to me in that moment, I'm gonna put it on there. And I think a lot of times I'm not necessarily sure what the outcome will be, but I think that's part of the magic that is happening between the two while you're creating that particular thing. And it's not always at the right moment. I'll get ideas when I'm at work. I'll get ideas when I'm walking down the street. So when I decided to finish that piece, I finished the woman, and I had the scarf because I found the scarf in the store. I went in the store and I saw the scarf and I loved it. And I would say like a lot of my work relates to me and my identity because a lot of the things that I see are things that I love in general. So I'd probably wear the scarf myself or have it as my own like bag accessory. But particularly for that scarf, I wanted to use it in a painting because the colors really spoke to me. I wanted to show like the Caribbean, the bright colors, the houses, the culture, the fruits, everything like that. So that's kind of why I chose that particular scarf. So then I took that and I was like, okay, I'm gonna use that for this piece. And I kind of just developed it over time. And orange is one of my favorite colors because it's bright and makes me think of sunshine, even though like most people might say yellow. But I wanted to include the butterflies because it symbolizes life, growth, like the evolution of becoming from a caterpillar to a butterfly. So things like that, little things where it's like, I don't necessarily think right away my Haitian identity might come out in terms of my style not being traditional. But when I use different materials, I think I, in some way, communicate that in other ways. So that's kind of part of my process of choosing certain colors with intent. So that way they symbolize certain things to me or maybe other cultures or other people, and seeing like life through plants, seeing like hope through certain colors, happiness through certain colors. So as that developed, I kind of went through creating the composition. And then the resin was the last part where I was nervous because I wasn't sure if it was gonna
Resin. Can you explain to what's that?
So resin is what is on those two paintings on the end. It gives the painting almost like a glass-like finish, but you have to mix the resin with epoxy. And then you have a window of time that you can work with it before it starts to harden. And certain things react to it if you're not familiar with it, and you have to mix it equal parts. So if it's not mixed equal parts, certain materials might burn through it, and it might destroy the whole painting.
So the reason I ask that is because there is chemistry.
Yes. So it's all like part of my head. I'm thinking like, for example, acrylic, you have to paint acrylic first. You can't do acrylic on top of oil because acrylic's water-based and oil is oil-based. So little things like that and kind of play into what I decided to do. So when I got to the point where I knew I was basically done with the painting, I ended up adding the sketch and the ink last minute. Because I was like, oh, you know, it's not enough with this, and I'm a maximist, so I have to have more. And I think a huge challenge is figuring out the balance in the composition. Because I always want a little bit more, but I also have to step away and know when enough is enough. So I think that's like something that I'm constantly kind of working through. But in the moment that I do something, that's when I know it's right, and I step away and I can like leave it at where it's at. So the resin kind of was the last thing that I added to it, and I didn't know if it was gonna mess up the scarf, which was the main thing I had in the whole piece. So I ended up doing the resin and adding the scarf after. And that let it stay so that I can then manipulate the texture that I wanted in it. And then after that did happen, I went back and painted over it, and then I burned it. So I can have it like blended with the painting to get rid of all the bubbles, but that's extra stuff. But that's basically my process. So really, I can't really say to it all being the same. Every piece is unique in its own way, and I don't always necessarily know what I'm going to do. I think it's a process that it kind of has to speak to you, and you just kind of go with it and trust your instinct, and I just go with my gut feeling. And a lot of times it works. Sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time it does.
So let me allow Steve to answer that question. I'll have two other questions for them, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience and try to see if you could make it brief. I'll do mine brief. So texture, tone, for you is that the canvas, is the blank page, and how do you decide which piece to work on, to critique, right? Not to criticize, but to critique.
So for me, I'm just looking to contextualize the artist's experience. I'm interested in where you fit in the history of the entire movement. So as you talk about the process for you as an artist, I know that the level of training that you've dedicated yourself to allows painting to choose you. You know that there are Haitian artists that say music is choisi, I don't have a choice about it. That's how I feel about the guitar. I have tried to not play guitar. My parents were against me. They were against artists being part of the family, right? There are things that choose you. And so as I think about them as artists, and when we tell you that something is working through them, that's what that means. There's a training that they're committed to that then allows them to be used to do wherever the work is going to lead them. They have to trust that process, but that training is allowing them to hear or to feel whatever they need to feel to produce. So one of the things that will happen to me as a critic, I'm going to look at that headscarf and think about the moment in history where Black women were forced to wear scarves to hide the beauty of their hair. I'm going there. And then I'm going to think about the tradition of surrealist painters in Haiti that need the art to draw us into the spirit realm. Because in her painting, she has a three-dimensional element where life is coming out of the canvas into our three-dimensional world. So it's no longer a 2D experience, right? Why did she feel the need to do that? So as a critic, I'm just looking to tease myself with questions. But I'm looking for the traditions that she's a part of continuing. And it's the same thing with Cherie. So as I think about, the impact of the earthquake, what he saw, what other tragedies, who are the other artists who lived through tumultuous events in Haiti, who needed to capture something of that moment so that posterity can have some sense of how one person experienced it, or maybe how a community experienced it, right? The sweeping in the streets, you're right, it doesn't happen in Port-au-Prince. I'm a Port-au-Princean, I've never seen that. And the idea that we had a government at one time that had the presence of mind to just put people to work, right? That's the part of that piece that I want to hear so that I can really understand what I'm seeing and then bring others into the conversation.
Okay. So I'm going to ask two questions and then to be as brief as possible. I did not want to start with those questions because some of them might be cliche. I don't like cliche at all. As a writer, as a professor, as a thinker, I don't like cliches. Now, one of the cliches, as far as culture is concerned, not just Haitian culture, but many cultures, artists are crazy. Artists are vagabond. Artists are eccentric. Artists, we don't understand what they're doing. And so therefore, don't be an artist or whatever else. What can you, as artists, tell us in terms of this complex machine, which is the brain, that you are operating at a completely different level to bring the interior complexities to the exterior materiality so that you as artists who call crazy could create the aesthetic. Oh, this is so beautiful, let me look at this. The desire for representation that every culture must have artists. Every culture, right? So how do you go from that cliche, artists are crazy, but also artists are desired, and how do you resolve this kind of complexity and what's in the interior to the materiality?
Lovely question. And I will start by answering it this way. As a child, when you decide you're going to go out and play with your friends, you have no idea what we are going to do. We just get together and then the play comes to us and we play. As artists, when we present a piece to you, we are inviting you to be that child, to come out and play. No idea, no preconception, nothing. Just come out and play. Artists, to go more specifically to your question, are all of the above. All these cliches are the artist. That's what makes an artist so interesting. Now, does that make me interesting? I don't know. That's for you to decide. However, though, I find anyone that can be that complex to be interesting. So, the artist, and I think we all have said the same thing, the artist is a complex machine that is at the same time a bridge that connects worlds. The artist is a machine that is also just a block of glass that allows light to go right through him or her. To go from one world to another, and vice versa. The artist is not static, just as the work itself is not static. The essence of it all is to come out and play. Just play.
And to add to that, I would say for artists, I think we are vessels, I would say, to like transport information, communicate with people, document history, showcase moments in life or things that exist, don't exist in the past, in the future, imagination. I think it's a combination of all those things because we can now put it in a physical form. We take all those things, it's like collecting data, and then you make it in a physical form, and then that physical form will live beyond after the time I've lived my full life. Those pieces will exist, and the next generation can interpret it in however way they want to interpret it. So I think artists, in a sense, they're very complex, and I think we observe the world around us differently, we see things differently, and we might see things before other people see things, I would say. I guess a part of it is an element of craziness, but also like foresight.
Crazy.
Yeah, I know. But I think it's, I think that's what makes us unique individuals, because what would the world be without art? I don't think humanity would exist without art. There's art in everything. I see art in almost just about anything. And the patterns in nature, people, cooking, music. A lot of my art is inspired by music. I consider it an extension of my art a lot of times because sometimes music captures emotions that you can't even explain in that moment, but you hear it and you get it immediately, even without even knowing what that actual musician's inspiration was. And it kind of puts it into words. So I think for me as an artist, I think I'm just adding to that narrative. I'm just giving you the physical, visual, and then adding whatever other artists are adding to the conversation. So I would say that's kind of my experience.
Steve?
I think you're right. I think being an artist is when the universe one day wakes you up when you're 7 years old, maybe 5 years old, and somebody calls you crazy for the first time. There's a part of you along that journey that says, okay, well, then I guess I have to be brave enough to be crazy, right? Because that's where Bob Marley is going to take chances in Jamaica. That's where Picasso is going to take chances, and I'm not going to draw these pretty pictures that you can quickly understand. I'm going to draw lines. That's where Hector Hippolyte finds the courage to go from painting things you can understand to abstract things that you think are ugly. And that color tone is right. You have to be brave enough to have all of society critique you, all of society judge you. Sometimes people understand what you've done. Sometimes they don't understand what you've done. No matter how much money you have in your pocket, you're gonna go and buy these expensive things you need to do your art, while other people don't want to spend 1 penny to buy it. And you're gonna have to find a way to insure it, to store it somewhere. So you do have to be crazy. Because that's the load that the universe or the creator has put on your back, and you have to find joy whether or not you fail or succeed. So there's an element of bravery that it invites you to kind of take on. The beautiful thing about that is if you embrace your crazy, and you do your work, and you do your best at your work, there's another generation of little kids who look at your stuff and they say, you know what? I'm going to take a chance and be Zora Neale Hurston too. I'm going to be Jean Paul too.
very stern African American writer from Florida who spent some time in Haiti during the U.S. occupation and became a major African American writer, so that we have the same kind of context. So I'm going to open it up for questions, but before I do, I would like for you to think about your question, okay? Before I do, when did you know that you were an artist, and when was that transformation that solidified your artistry?
I started painting officially. I was about 5 years old. And I scribbled, drew, painted, watercolor, oil on everything that I could find. My father was a painter, and he would tell me, this is nice, and I would keep going. I was 11 when I realized that I was an artist. Because it was the first time, 6 years later, that my father would officially, openly, and publicly acknowledge that I had maybe some skill. We were visiting some friends of his, two sisters who lived together, older ladies who were never married. And during the conversation that evening after dinner, they presented my dad with a small image of Jesus knocking at a door. And they say, Taten, we'd like you to paint this for us. Very large painting. We don't want that small thing. Now, for those of you who may not know, these images were very popular when I was a kid. Catholics give them to each other. When you do your first communion, you receive them as gift. You use them as bookmarks.
Yeah, they were like this size, tiny.
Yeah, you put them in your books as bookmarks, or you put them on the wall. I mean, and sometimes they have prayer in the back. Now, my dad looked at the image, looked at me, and he said, yeah, we can do that, but he will do it. Now I was shocked. I thought that he was playing, he was joking. But when it became real, I was shocked.
The affirmation.
The affirmation, because this was really the first time that he acknowledged that I had probably some skills. Now, I must say also that I was petrified because my dad was a very strict guy. And all this time that I had been painting and drawing, he had never really paid attention to my processes or to my process. Well, this time, he was hovering over my shoulder, watching my every move. Now, this was the time. The interesting thing that happened with this is that I painted this, and I wasn't sure whether I was the painter or my dad was the painter. So I didn't sign it. We delivered the painting, and that was it. The two ladies, one died, the other one kept the painting. And when the second one died, she willed it to me. And years later, as a grown man with family, I received this painting. And it's part of my collection now.
I would say I would like to think that I've been an artist since I was probably very young. I realized I was good at drawing probably when I was about 5, 6, because I was always doodling, similar to you. I was doodling in my books, in class, all the time. So my mom already kind of knew, but she was very much, she wasn't very supportive in me doing my art. So I never gave it much thought. I just thought it was something I was just naturally good at, and that it wasn't going to take me anywhere. So I just didn't really pay much attention to it. I did start paying more attention to it as I got older, when I was like a teenager, like 15, when I was in high school, and I had like art classes, and I managed to get in the IB art program, and I got accepted into the AP art program, and I was really excited about it. So that's kind of when I started.
Advanced placement.
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay, so,
Yes, advanced placement art program in high school. So that's when I started to paint. Before that, I was doing just mostly sketching, but I experimented with a lot of different things, like different mediums of art, and that's kind of where my journey like kind of started, because I started to create more, and then I joined the assembly, and I was seeing other artists that were doing it who were a lot older than me, who had more experience, and I think that's kind of when I saw that that was something that I could do and not feel shame for doing it, and not feel like I'm not succeeding in doing that. So I think after that happened, and it was time for me to go to college and pick what I wanted to study. I didn't end up studying art. I applied to art school even though I knew my mom wouldn't really care for me to do that, and I got accepted into it, and I think that kind of helped solidify how I felt about my art abilities or talents. And then from there, I think for me personally, I like to think that I started to really develop my artistic identity and kind of fall into that back in 2018. I would say just because that's when I decided that I was going to do what I wanted to do with my art and how I wanted to do it, whether or not people like it or think it's considered good art. And I think that's when I really was able to find my voice, based on like, there was a lot of things happening in that moment, in that year. And I think a lot of it, again, also inspired my style. When I was in college, I used to get my hair braided all the time and wear cowrie shells in my hair. And my professor, he was a African studies professor, he pointed it out to me, and he was telling me about Senegal. And I started to like research it. I was always very studious, so I was always into like history. That was one of my favorite subjects. And I kind of like started to have almost like an obsession with it, even though I kind of always had them in my vicinity, in my jewelry, my hair, my bags. I never thought about much of it or the meaning. And then I did the research and found out the symbolism of that particular thing and how it symbolized like wealth in certain communities. It was like protection, like femininity, all these things that it symbolized and how it looked. And it kind of like helped me develop my artistic story. So I kind of just continued to include different elements in my work and developed it over that time span. I think that was the biggest break, when I kind of realized, okay, like these things are all happening simultaneously. A lot of it had to do with, again, like I said, like the music and film. That was when Black Panther came out. And that movie, I feel like, changed my life, because I feel, in a lot of ways, it was the first time I saw Black people in that light to such excellence, where it was like a movie about greatness and not struggle or slavery or domestic violence, or just, it was just a movie that put people who looked like me in the light that I wanted people to see us as. And it was a time where certain brands, they weren't producing, like I'm very into fashion, makeup, all that stuff, and there was such a lack of diversity in those things. And that was when Fenty Beauty came out as well, and that was when Beyonce released her album and had
Lemonade.
Yeah, all those things happening all at the same time, I think kind of inspired me and it kind of pushed me to step outside of that and like try to create my own version of that through my artwork. So that's kind of when I think it really solidified in my head that I was an artist, and as long as I think that I am, and everybody else can catch up after.
Good. Now that
I don't get to answer.
Sorry.
Can we talk?
Yeah.
So, I knew I was an artist because I had one of those tough Haitian moms who was a teacher in Haiti. So these are the kind of women who get their way with the children especially. So I have my cousin Ray in the back here. He can attest to the very tough and dictatorial nature of the Haitian household led by a woman, right? And so I want you to appreciate the appreciation I have for her, because she found a way to get 2 kids out of Haiti into America, and I don't know what it took to make that happen. But our first big argument was, Mom, I think I'm gonna be a guitarist. And she looked at my little 8-year-old self or 9-year-old self. She said, "Papa, je suis un artiste dans la famille, ça. Ou t'es maintenant fait docteur, ingénieur, mais avocat." Years go by. Well, one of the first signs was that I knew she wasn't going to help, so I got myself a job at 9 years old at the mobile gas station in Madison Square. They paid me $10 a week, and that's how I saved to buy my own guitars. So that was the beginning, paid for my lessons. The next thing was, I did wind up applying and getting into law school to appease my mother. That's how tough she was, right? But I would go to law school with my guitar on my back, and so everybody was looking at me like, how do you even have time with all this reading? And so during my first year of law school, I met Richard Cave, who was a friend of Fito Fagner, who was a promoter here, music promoter here. And Fito was a good friend of mine. He said, listen, this guy's calling me, they put out an album, they're kind of looking for a guitarist. Learn some of these songs. I learned the songs. Richard flies in from New York. I play the songs for him. The next conversation is, listen, we're going to be flying you out every weekend because the band has a hit album. We can't play without a good guitarist, so what are you going to do? I tendered my resignation to law school that next weekend. My mother never forgave me for that. And off I was in kindness. So every year my mother reminds me, it's not too late for you to go back and get that scholarship and finish law school.
It's not too late.
It's not too late.
All right, really good. Okay, so 2 questions.
Yes.
Be brief. All right, don't be shy. Okay. Oh, okay. 2 hands. Here we go.
Well, usually thank you for everything you guys are doing and bringing.
Who are you? Who are you?
Oh, my name is Stephen Matthew.
Okay.
And I'm a fan of those guys already. We know each other. And Joseph Cherry been telling me about you. So I'm looking forward to your work and also pushing in some of the things that you're doing. The question that I have is, how do you guys survive sometimes negativity? You know, you might not have thought of that, whether it's from your spouse, your mom, your dad, when things are not going well, because you got to fight through something that they don't quite understand. Society don't always understand. But in your mind, it's who you are. You know, that's what brings joy to you and what brings joy to us. How do you fight through that the low and the negativity when that happens? Because it happens a lot, I know.
Okay, good. So remember that question? All right.
Time.
Yeah, so remember that question? Okay. So go ahead.
My name is Victor. I know a few people here. So I'd like to follow up on the last question in terms of you all three of you are pretty self-assured artists now, and I'm interested in the journey that got you to this point. So I heard from you, Blin, that you had a very supportive mom. Joseph talked about his dad was very strict, and then you talked about embracing your crazy. I'm interested in the internal resources, how you had to manage family expectations, society's expectations, and then what you felt your passion was.
Okay, well that's good because the 2 questions are connected, right?
Right.
Okay, so would you like to start?
It kind of sounds kind of funny, but I think the way I kind of, to answer your question, is by creating, if that makes sense. It's kind of just taking that and then developing something from it. I would say trying to do something that you love, I tried to escape art, I would say, in the sense where I didn't do art for a long time, but I always came back to it. And I think it also manifests itself in different ways, because when I wasn't painting, I worked in jewelry, I worked in like fashion, so really it kind of developed in other ways. I think it kind of just shows up, and then once it does come back, it's a way to ground you. So I would say for me, it's always something that I come back to. I don't think it's going to leave me, probably until the day I leave this earth, but I would say to block out that noise,
The noise in negativity.
negativity. I think about, for me, it's the people that see my art and then they tell me the stories or how they connected to the art and why I should continue. Like, as of recent, I think recently was the longest time I spent without creating art was this last year and a half, almost 2 years, where I was creating but I wasn't finishing anything. And anyone who knows me, like, I have no issue finishing art and doing a lot of art quickly. Not because I'm rushing, but because I can focus on something and produce it in a short amount of time that maybe some other people would not be able to do. And I think, again, I was in that place because of things that were happening around me that was affecting my mental, so I wasn't able to complete things. And I think trying to get out of that was me just going back, and I was invited to a show in February for Black History Month. And I was like, you know what, I have pieces that I finished, I'll just take them and bring them to her. And I ended up meeting someone at that show that was following me for like 3 or 4 years, and they're like, you know, I watched your whole journey.
With a following, because following
online,
okay.
social media.
All right.
Sorry. Yeah, so they recognize my work. Like they've seen my work online, but they had never seen it in person, and they've never met me in person. And this woman happened to be someone who was a hair stylist, and then she ended up having cancer, and then she survived, and she was telling me her story, and then she was telling me how much she connected to my art and saw herself in my art. And I think that really like hit me. I hear stories all the time of how people connect to my art, especially if they're purchasing the art or if they've just seen it in person and they kind of relate to it or they understand whatever they can make of it. So I think having that is also a good way to kind of get out of those negative thoughts or feelings of inadequacy. What is it? Inadequacy. You know what a word?
Inadequacy.
Yeah. That word that I can't pronounce. Yes, so that, or imposter syndrome, that's the word, where it's like you feel like you're not meeting those standards or that you're not good enough, and it's like, it happens to everyone, I would say, or at least in my experience, and I think climbing out of that is thinking of those moments where you've met people who see what you're doing, and it might not be for everyone, but it is for someone, and it has helped them come out of something, or they love that work that you're doing, and in doing it, you're also growing and healing yourself, I would say. So I think that's the only way to go about it is to continue it, I would say, is my answer.
I said earlier that this is all about coming out to play. To tune out the noise, the negativity, is to find the joy in not just what you are doing, but in how it is affecting and affecting people. It is being able to accept that this joy itself is not static. It changes, and it changes identity. So you have to be in tune with it so that you can always identify it and connect with it. Steve embraced his crazy. I embrace my joy, but I have to find it. At 5 years old, my joy was that my dad had finally, at 11. At 11 years old, my dad finally acknowledged that I may have had some skills. That was the joy. But it changed over time. Today, my joy is that I'm not my father. And Miss Victoria understands that. I am not my father. My biggest joy is that when I am sitting there with my brush, my companion in the same space on a different canvas on an easel is also painting next to me, and that's my 12-year-old daughter. With her, I didn't wait 6 years. She was 2 years old, I was painting, and she came and she said she wanted to paint. I gave her a brush, I gave her a small canvas board, and I asked her what color she wanted. She asked for green, yellow, and brown. And she painted. Did dots all over the place. And when she was done, she presented it to me. She said, I painted trees. When she was 5, we held a one-man show for her in Hyde Park, at the Hyde Park Library. She exhibited 21 pieces and sold all of them in less than 2 hours. And until today, I'm known as the dad who can't paint. That's why I can't sell all my paintings every time I do. That is my joy today. What will it be tomorrow? I don't know. Let it transform itself. I only know that I will be there to identify and embrace it.
I think I remember the first part of the question. I think I have to remember yours. But the first, I wish I could say I have a brave answer, but I was good at it because I had a tough mom, and my cousin Ray is back there, she could tell you. It's a family of really strong women. I was able to give people the version of Steve that they could deal with, and I kept my crazy to my friends who could understand it. So Boston is the place of Berkeley School of Music. There was a version of Steve that they got to experience. And then when I was in front of my family, they saw the guy who went to BC, who's a history major, thinking about law school, and that's what they saw. And what would happen every once in a while, somebody would tell my mother, Atis, they were petit tout on la télévision, t'as joué guitare, Steve is playing guitar. Do you know this? Right. So that's how I dealt with my crazy. I cultivated it that way, and I think your question reminded me again.
So it was about what? So to embrace your crazy, what strategies did you use to embrace it
I
to
became a
manage
chameleon. I don't know if that was the brave thing to do, but I became, I showed folks the version of Steve they needed to see, and then I cultivated myself with friends who were on the crazy road, right? So that meant musicians, it meant reading Bob Marley's life story like 1,000,000 times, it meant watching certain YouTube videos that had to do with artistry and theory, so stuff like that. We're doing that at 10 o'clock at night when everybody's trying to get to sleep, we're over here. We put 4 hours into this.
Can I make a plug?
Well, no, because of time.
No,
I'm sorry.
I'm making a plug.
Oh no, I know what that. Okay, hold on. So we are going to transition to a silent auction, but before we do that, I really would like to thank the members of the panel, Steve Desrosiers, Yveline Joseph M. Chéry, for their candid and profound, talk about art. And I think there aren't too many young people, but at the same time, there could be older folks who are going to enter into art for the first time. And I think there's some of the key elements, that notions of vulnerability, right? How you must allow yourself to be vulnerable in order to be in conversation with the thing, right? And the thing is the subconscious, right? The creative things that's going on inside your head that must be put somewhere in whatever form, whether it is through arts, through cooking, but cooking is also art, right? Through the various forms of arts in order to be true to yourself. The other issue, regardless of negativity, social forces, you must be true to your own identity, be able to express that identity in a way that is very genuine to you. But also the other things is also to transform whatever that's going on in forms of art into something that is extremely pleasing, that brings joy, something that is aesthetic, something that moves, but to also be true to it. And I think whether it is from Steve, who is doing music, writing about arts, or the two artists who are creating, and I did not talk about myself as a writer, but that would be a whole different time, but we all can relate, and those of you who are different artists in different ways could relate. So let's give them a big hand for thank you very much for participating. Now, I'm going to give the microphone back to Joseph Chéry in a different way, and Charles Lucien. Thank you.
I'm going in. This is real love.
For auction.
Yes.
Good.
This is real love. I want to thank you all for being so kind as to spend so much time listening to our craziness. We tried tonight to create art with words, but we are not poets, so we may have failed. This should not discourage you to take the next step. For what we create as artists, we create it for you, not for our consumption, but for you to consume, for you to embrace, for you to enjoy, for you to interact with. This process of writing chapters can only begin when you adopt a painting. So, how do you do that? We have put together for you a very, what we believe to be, interesting collection of work. It represents some of our latest work. We also have additional work that we have brought that pave the way into this idea, into this action of adopting art. Become a parent of the art. And to do that, we invite you to consider bidding silently on some pieces of artwork that we have assembled for you. Process is very simple. The work is there. You can see it. You can touch it. You can communicate with it. You can even commune with it. If it pleases you, better yet, if it talks to you, if it engages you, then engages back. Bid on it. The starting bid is on the sheet. It tells you how much the first bid needs to be. From that point on, anyone who goes and bid need to increment it by at least $20. Notice. So if the first person bid, let's say $300, and you want that work, you can bid at least $320. More if you want. But
So $300. So then what?
$320,
Okay, then
$340.
okay, all right. So
And it
let's get
continues.
going. Okay.
So the last person on the bid wins the piece at that price. Now, there are, from what I understand, some of this work that are there for bid, where the auction will continue beyond tonight, right? Okay, so.
Let's make it happen tonight.
Oh no, it's all tonight. Okay, all right. So that was a consideration that I was throwing.
Mais it's different.
All right, so, thank you. Thank you so much. The encouragement we get from you comes in many shapes. It is also a book of chapters. The first chapter, you have written it tonight by being here to listen to us. Let's write the next chapter together. Let's go look at the work and let's adopt something. Thank you.
Okay. So rapidement. Regardez sur les trois tableaux. Derrière là, dans l'autre tableau, il y a une auction en silence. Il y a un monde qui a besoin. Il y a un tableau ça. Mettez non, levez en $300, $200. L'autre monde il est capable de courir dire ah, le tableau ça 220. Ok. On fait ça en façon qu'on nous capable de sortir là avec un tableau. Ok, s'il te plaît. Donc on fait ça à cause de ils sont temps. Pourquoi aller?
Je voulais dire merci, monsieur Damlo. I was able to see an aspect of you that I did not know, and this opportunity gave me the possibility to say.
Thank you.
That's excellent. I like what you said about the woman was sweeping the floor and how the ideas chose you become the instrument of the idea. That was very well put. And thank you too for your work. I was going to ask you